For more than 1,000 years, one city refused to fall. Persians failed. Arabs failed. Crusaders failed. Generation after generation, armies marched against Constantinople and were shattered by its legendary walls. Many believed the city was unconquerable. Then, in 1453, a 21-year-old sultan arrived at its gates. His name was Mehmed II, and Mehmed was preparing something the world had never seen before. He brought giant cannons powerful enough to shake the earth. He brought an army determined to fulfill a centuries-old dream. And when even that wasn't enough, he devised a plan so unbelievable that many would later think it was a legend. He would move an entire fleet of warships over land. For centuries, Muslim rulers had hoped to fulfill a famous speech attributed to the Prophet Muhammad. Constantinople will surely be conquered. What a wonderful leader will conquer it, and what a wonderful army will be that army. None had succeeded until Mehmed II did, because before this story ends, the last Roman emperor will make his final stand. The greatest city in Christendom will fall, and the course of world history will change forever. Long before the Ottoman Empire became a great power, Constantinople occupied a special place in the imagination of the Muslim world. For generations, it was seen as the ultimate prize, not simply because of its wealth, and not simply because of its strategic location, but because conquering the city meant achieving something that had remained unfinished for centuries. As the Islamic world expanded across the Middle East, North Africa, and beyond, rulers repeatedly looked toward Constantinople. The city stood at the crossroads of continents. Its harbors connected major trade routes. Its influence stretched far beyond its walls. Whoever controlled Constantinople controlled one of the most important gateways in the known world. That reality made the city impossible to ignore. Across the centuries, new dynasties emerged. The Umayyads, the Abbasids, the Seljuks. Each generation inherited the same ambition, and each generation passed that ambition to the next. Yet time seemed to favor the city. Rulers died, kingdoms disappeared, borders changed, but Constantinople remained exactly where it had always been, watching, waiting, almost daring the next conqueror to try. By the early 15th century, however, the balance of power was beginning to shift. A new empire was rising, the Ottomans. Unlike previous powers, they were no longer distant rivals. They surrounded Constantinople from nearly every direction. The Byzantine Empire that had once ruled vast territories was shrinking rapidly. Its influence faded. Its resources dwindled. Its future grew increasingly uncertain. And still, the city endured. For many observers, Constantinople seemed trapped between two realities. It looked like the capital of an empire, but it was becoming the capital of an empire that no longer existed. Meanwhile, beyond the city's walls, a new generation was growing up inside the Ottoman world. A generation that no longer viewed Constantinople as an impossible dream. They viewed it as an unfinished task. Among them was a young prince who became fascinated by the city. He studied its history, he studied its rulers, and he studied the failures of those who had come before him. While others saw a city that had survived for centuries, he began searching for the reason why. And once he believed he understood the answer, everything changed. The prince's name was Mehmed, and from an early age, he became obsessed with a single question. How do you conquer a city that no one else can conquer? Most people who met Mehmed saw only his age. That was their first mistake. He was born in 1432, the son of Sultan Murad II, ruler of the Ottoman Empire. From an early age, it was clear that Mehmed was not being raised for an ordinary life. As an Ottoman prince, he received an education designed to prepare future rulers for power. The expectations were enormous. One day he would govern provinces, command armies, negotiate with foreign powers, and perhaps inherit an empire. To prepare him, some of the finest scholars in the Ottoman world were assigned to his education. Mehmed studied mathematics, history, geography, religion, politics, military strategy. But what impressed many observers most was his appetite for learning. He was known to spend long hours reading and discussing ideas with his teachers. Unlike many princes of the era, Mehmed developed a fascination with the wider world. He learned multiple languages, including Turkish, Arabic, and Persian. Many historians also believe he gained knowledge of Greek and Latin sources, allowing him to study the histories of both the Islamic and classical worlds. The young prince became particularly fascinated by great conquerors of the past: Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, leaders whose victories had reshaped history. He read about their campaigns, their ambitions, their triumphs, and he began imagining what his own legacy might look like. Yet knowledge alone would never be enough. An Ottoman ruler was expected to be more than a scholar. He also had to be a warrior. Like generations of princes before him, Mehmed received military training from an early age. He learned horsemanship, swordsmanship, archery, command, and the harsh realities of leadership. Because in the medieval world, a ruler who could not lead soldiers rarely remained a ruler for long. Then came his first taste of power. In 1444, when Mehmed was only 12 years old, his father unexpectedly stepped down from the throne. Suddenly, the boy became Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, at least in name. For many European leaders, the news seemed encouraging. A child now sat on one of the most powerful thrones in the region. Some assumed the empire would become unstable. Others believed experienced advisors would control the young ruler. Events soon proved how dangerous those assumptions could be. Not long after Mehmed's accession, a coalition of European forces launched a major campaign against the Ottomans. The crisis quickly exposed the limitations of a teenage sultan trying to govern an empire during wartime. Faced with growing pressure, Mehmed appealed to his father to return. Murad II resumed command and led the Ottoman response. The invasion was defeated, the empire survived, and Mehmed learned an unforgettable lesson. Power was not something a ruler inherited. It was something a ruler had to earn. Several years later, Murad reclaimed full authority while Mehmed continued his education and political training. Many young princes might have viewed this as a humiliation. Mehmed viewed it as preparation. He observed, he studied, he waited, and all the while, one idea continued to occupy his thoughts: Constantinople. The city remained at the center of Ottoman territory, a Byzantine island surrounded by Ottoman lands, a reminder that the work of conquest was unfinished. When Mehmed studied history, Constantinople appeared again. When he studied strategy, Constantinople appeared again. When he examined previous rulers and military campaigns, Constantinople appeared again. The city seemed impossible to ignore. Then, in 1451, everything changed. Murad II died. At just 19 years old, Mehmed became Sultan once more. This time, there would be no returning the throne. This time, the empire was truly his. Many European observers greeted the news with relief. They remembered the young prince, the inexperienced ruler, the teenager who had struggled during his first reign. Some diplomats even reported that Mehmed posed little immediate threat. Others believed internal politics would keep him occupied for years. They could not have been more wrong, because while Europe saw a boy, Mehmed was already thinking about Constantinople. And unlike the rulers who had come before him, he was not interested in merely attacking the city. He intended to solve the problem that had defeated conquerors for centuries. He intended to finish what others had started, and he was already gathering the tools to do it. While Europe saw a boy, Mehmed was already preparing the most ambitious siege in history. If Mehmed wanted to conquer Constantinople, he first had to solve a problem that had defeated conquerors for centuries: the city itself. To understand why so many rulers failed, you have to understand what Constantinople actually was. This was not an ordinary medieval city. It was the capital of the Byzantine Empire, the last surviving remnant of the Roman Empire. For nearly 1100 years, emperors ruled from its palaces. Its churches were famous throughout Christendom. Its merchants connected continents. This harbor welcomed ships from across the known world. Even in decline, Constantinople remained one of the most important cities on earth. But its greatest strength was neither wealth nor prestige. It was defense. Anyone approaching Constantinople from the west immediately faced a terrifying obstacle: the Theodosian walls. Built in the 5th century, they were among the greatest fortifications ever constructed. A deep moat guarded the outer approach. Behind it stood an outer wall. Behind that stood a much larger inner wall reinforced by massive towers. An attacker could breach one line of defense and still face another, and another. In some places, the defenses rose more than 40 feet above the surrounding ground. From the battlements, defenders could fire arrows, crossbows, stones, and artillery onto anyone attempting to advance. The system was so effective that many military historians consider it one of the most successful defensive structures ever built. And history seemed to agree. For centuries, the walls had protected the city from invasion. Persians failed, Arabs failed, Bulgars failed, Rus armies failed. Again and again, enemies appeared before the walls. Again and again, the city survived. By Mehmed's time, the walls had become something more than stone. They had become a legend, a symbol of invincibility. Many believed they could never be broken. Even the Byzantines themselves took pride in that reputation. They had lost provinces. They had lost armies. They had lost wealth. But the walls remained. And as long as the walls remained, hope remained. Emperor Constantine XI understood this better than anyone. He knew the empire was no longer strong. The Byzantine state had shrunk dramatically. Most of its former territory was gone. The Ottoman Empire surrounded Constantinople on nearly every side. Yet Constantine believed the city could still survive. After all, it had survived worse. The emperor was intelligent, determined, and realistic. He understood the danger posed by Mehmed, but he also understood the city's greatest advantage: time. Every day Constantinople remained standing increased the chances of outside help arriving. Perhaps Venice would send ships. Perhaps Genoa would send soldiers. Perhaps the kingdoms of Europe would unite to save the city. The longer the walls held, the greater the chance of survival. And so Constantine prepared. Repairs were made. Supplies were gathered. Defensive positions were strengthened. Every available soldier was counted. The problem was numbers. The Ottoman Empire could draw upon vast resources. Constantinople could not. When the final siege approached, the city's defenders numbered only a few thousand men. Many sections of the walls would have to be defended by surprisingly small forces. Some towers contained only a handful of soldiers. Yet morale remained surprisingly strong, because the defenders believed history was on their side. Those walls had protected their ancestors. Those walls had protected their fathers. And they believed those same walls would protect them. Meanwhile, Mehmed was reaching a very different conclusion. He had studied every failed siege, every failed ruler, every failed strategy. And the lesson he took away was simple. The walls were not unbeatable. Previous conquerors simply lacked the means to destroy them. If Constantinople had a weakness, it was hidden behind stone. And Mehmed intended to find it. To do so, he needed something no previous attacker had possessed. A weapon capable of changing the rules of warfare itself. A weapon so enormous that witnesses would struggle to believe their own eyes. Soon, rumors began spreading across the Ottoman Empire. Rumors of a giant cannon, a machine unlike anything the medieval world had ever seen. If the walls of Constantinople had survived for 1,000 years, what would happen when they faced a weapon built specifically to tear them apart? For centuries, Constantinople's walls had defeated nearly every army that stood before them. Mehmed believed the problem was not courage. It was technology. The walls had been designed for a different age. An age of ladders, siege towers, catapults, battering rams. But warfare was changing, and Mehmed intended to use that change. Sometime after becoming Sultan, he was approached by a man named Orban. Little is known about his early life. Some sources describe him as a Hungarian engineer. Others simply describe him as a master founder of cannons. What mattered was his skill. Orban claimed he could build weapons powerful enough to shatter even the walls of Constantinople. Before approaching the Ottomans, he reportedly offered his services to the Byzantines. But the empire was nearly bankrupt. Emperor Constantine XI could not afford the engineer's ambitions. So Orban went elsewhere, straight to Mehmed. And unlike the Byzantines, the young sultan was willing to pay. Not only pay, he encouraged Orban to build something larger than anything seen before. The result would become legendary. For months, workers gathered iron, bronze, and enormous quantities of raw materials. Foundries worked day and night. The project consumed vast resources. Yet Mehmed never hesitated. He understood what was at stake. If the walls were the city's greatest strength, then destroying those walls became the entire objective. Eventually, the massive cannon was completed. Witnesses struggled to describe its size. Some accounts claim the barrel measured more than 8 meters long. Its stone projectiles weighed hundreds of kilograms. A single shot could be heard for miles. When the cannon was tested, the explosion reportedly shook the surrounding countryside. People rushed from nearby villages to see what had happened. Animals fled in panic. The sound alone was terrifying. But building the cannon was only the beginning. Now Mehmed faced another challenge: moving it. The giant bombard was so large that transporting it became a military operation of its own. Teams of oxen were assembled. Hundreds of workers accompanied the convoy. Roads had to be reinforced. Bridges required preparation. Progress was painfully slow. Day after day, the enormous weapon crawled toward Constantinople. Every mile demonstrated the scale of Mehmed's commitment. This was no ordinary campaign. This was a siege planned years in advance. A siege supported by resources few rulers could match. As news spread, anxiety grew inside Constantinople. The Byzantines had heard rumors. Some dismissed them. Others feared the reports were true. After all, the city's walls had survived countless attacks. But what if this weapon was different? What if the age of the walls was ending? The uncertainty alone was unsettling. Yet Constantine XI had little choice. He could not match Ottoman resources. He could not build a larger army. And he certainly could not build a larger cannon. His only option was the same strategy that had worked for centuries. Trust the walls. Trust history. Trust that Constantinople could endure one more siege. Meanwhile, Mehmed's preparations continued. The cannon was only one part of a much larger plan. Shipyards expanded production. Supplies were stockpiled. Engineers prepared siege equipment. Soldiers gathered from across the empire. The Ottoman army grew larger with every passing month. By early 1453, there could be little doubt about Mehmed's intentions. War was coming, and everyone knew where it would begin. Then Mehmed made another move, one that revealed just how carefully he had prepared. On the European side of the Bosporus stood a newly constructed fortress, Rumeli-Hizari, built with astonishing speed. Its massive towers overlooked one of the most important waterways in the region. From there, Ottoman forces could monitor and control traffic moving toward Constantinople. The message was unmistakable. The city was being isolated. Help would have difficulty reaching it. Supplies would have difficulty reaching it. And when the siege began, Constantinople would largely stand alone. Inside the city, preparations intensified. Church bells rang. Walls were inspected. Food was stored. Citizens watched the horizon anxiously. Many understood that a confrontation was approaching. Perhaps the greatest confrontation in the city's long history. Then, in the spring of 1453, the waiting ended. The Ottoman army appeared before Constantinople. Tens of thousands of soldiers. Rows of tents stretching across the landscape. Siege equipment. Artillery. Banners fluttering beneath the spring sky. And somewhere among them stood the giant cannon. The weapon built to do what centuries of armies could not. Break the walls. On April 6, 1453, the siege officially began. And soon, the people of Constantinople would hear a sound unlike anything they had ever heard before. On April 6, 1453, the greatest siege of the medieval age officially began. Across the fields outside Constantinople, the Ottoman army stretched as far as the eye could see. Rows of tents covered the landscape. Soldiers from every corner of the empire filled the camps. Archers, cavalry, engineers, elite janissaries, and behind them stood the weapon everyone feared most, the giant bombards. For Emperor Constantine XI and the defenders on the walls, there was no turning back. The fate of the city would now be decided. Then came the first shot. A thunderous explosion echoed across the countryside. The ground trembled. Birds scattered into the sky. Moments later, a massive stone projectile slammed into the ancient walls. For centuries, those walls had repelled countless enemies. Now, for the first time, they faced a weapon powerful enough to crack them open. The bombardment continued day after day. Each shot shook buildings inside the city. Citizens could hear the impacts from miles away. Dust rose from damaged towers. Sections of masonry collapsed. Yet the walls did not fall. Not yet. Every night, while Ottoman soldiers rested, Byzantine defenders rushed to repair the damage. Men carried stones through the darkness. Priests encouraged exhausted workers. Citizens joined the effort. By sunrise, breaches that seemed catastrophic the day before were often partially repaired. Again and again, the city refused to die. Mehmed watched carefully. His cannons were causing damage, but not enough. The walls were stronger than expected. The siege was becoming a contest of endurance. Could the Ottomans destroy the defenses faster than the defenders could rebuild them? As the days passed, another problem emerged. Constantinople was still receiving support through the sea. The city's greatest natural defense was the Golden Horn, a deep inlet that protected the northern side of Constantinople. For centuries, the Byzantines had defended its entrance with a massive iron chain stretched across the water. The chain prevented enemy fleets from entering. As long as it remained in place, Ottoman ships could not reach the city's northern walls. Mehmed possessed a powerful fleet, but the chain made that fleet nearly useless. The Sultan attempted naval attacks. They failed. His ships could not force their way into the harbor. The Byzantines celebrated. For the first time since the siege began, they had good news. Then came an even bigger victory. A small Christian relief fleet appeared on the horizon. The ships carried supplies and reinforcements. Thousands of Ottoman soldiers watched from the shoreline as the naval battle unfolded. Mehmed himself rowed to observe the fighting. The Ottoman fleet vastly outnumbered the incoming vessels. The outcome seemed obvious, but the defenders fought fiercely. Against overwhelming odds, the Christian ships broke through. They reached the Golden Horn. The crowds inside Constantinople erupted in celebration. The defenders cheered from the walls. The relief ships had succeeded. Meanwhile, Mehmed was furious. He had watched the battle with his own eyes. He had expected victory. Instead, he witnessed a humiliating failure. Some chroniclers claim the young sultan was so enraged that he publicly threatened commanders responsible for the defeat. The message was clear. Failure would not be tolerated. Yet despite his anger, Mehmed understood something important. The problem was not his fleet. The problem was the chain. As long as the Golden Horn remained closed, Constantinople would continue to receive support and remain difficult to surround completely. The chain had to be bypassed, destroyed if possible, outsmarted if necessary. For days, the siege continued. Cannons roared. Defenders rebuilt. Neither side gained a decisive advantage. Then Mehmed began considering an idea so extraordinary that many initially thought it impossible. What if his ships did not enter the harbor through the water? What if they entered another way? The terrain around the Golden Horn was difficult. Steep hills rose above the harbor. Forests covered parts of the landscape. No fleet had ever crossed them. No commander would seriously attempt such a thing, or so everyone believed. But Mehmed had spent years studying failed sieges. He knew that doing what everyone expected would likely produce the same result everyone else had achieved: failure. So he started planning something different, something audacious, something that would shock both his enemies and his own soldiers. Soon, workers began gathering timber. Roads were prepared. Greased logs appeared across the hills overlooking the harbor. At first, few understood what was happening. Then the truth became clear. Mehmed was about to attempt one of the most famous military maneuvers in history. If the Ottoman fleet could not reach Constantinople through the sea, Mehmed would bring the sea to his fleet. When the sun rose, Constantinople saw Ottoman ships where no enemy ships should have been. The chains still held. The harbor was still closed. And from the walls of Constantinople, many defenders believed their greatest natural defense remained secure. For weeks, the massive iron chains stretched across the entrance to the Golden Horn had done exactly what it was designed to do: kept the Ottoman fleet out. No matter how many soldiers Mehmed commanded, no matter how many cannons he possessed, his ships remained trapped outside the harbor. But while the defenders watched the sea, Mehmed was studying the land. The young sultan had spent years examining the failures of earlier rulers. Again and again, he reached the same conclusion: the greatest victories often came from doing what an enemy considered impossible. And so he began preparing an operation unlike anything seen in medieval warfare. Workers were ordered into the hills north of the Golden Horn. Timber was gathered, trees were cut, wooden tracks were constructed across difficult terrain. The work continued quietly. Many Ottoman soldiers did not fully understand what was being built. Some probably assumed it was another engineering project connected to the siege. Only a small number knew the truth. The tracks were not for supplies. They were not for artillery. They were for ships. Once the route was completed, workers coated the wooden pathway with grease and animal fat. The objective was simple: reduce friction, allow heavy vessels to slide across the ground. Even then, success was far from guaranteed. The route crossed steep slopes and uneven terrain. One mistake could destroy a ship. One accident could expose the entire operation. But Mehmed pressed forward. The risk was enormous. The reward was even greater. Then came the night of the operation. Under darkness, activity spread across the Ottoman camp. Torchlight flickered across the hills. Ropes were prepared. Oxen were assembled. Sailors received their instructions. Slowly, the first ship began moving. It was an astonishing sight. A vessel built for the sea was now traveling over land. Men pulled from the front. Others pushed from behind. Engineers monitored every section of the route. The operation demanded coordination, strength, and patience. One ship followed another, then another. Throughout the night, the fleet continued its strange journey across the hills overlooking Constantinople. From a distance, lines of moving lights could be seen in the darkness. Few observers understood what they represented. The scale of the operation was difficult to comprehend. Even many experienced military commanders would have considered such a maneuver impossible. Yet it was happening. Hour after hour, Ottoman crews worked without stopping. The ships crept across the landscape. Wood groaned, ropes strained. Men shouted commands into the night. Above them, the stars shone over one of the most extraordinary military operations in history. By dawn, the effort had succeeded. Dozens of Ottoman vessels had crossed the hills. One by one, they were lowered into the waters of the Golden Horn. Not outside the harbor, inside it, behind the chain, behind the defenses, behind centuries of assumptions. For the first time, Ottoman warships floated in waters that the Byzantines believed were secure. Morning arrived. The defenders of Constantinople awoke, expecting another day of cannon fire and siege warfare. Instead, they looked toward the harbor and saw something that made little sense. Ships, Ottoman ships, inside the Golden Horn. Some stared in disbelief. Others rushed to alert commanders. Word spread rapidly across the city. The enemy fleet had somehow appeared where it was never supposed to be. The chain still stretched across the entrance. The harbor had not been breached. Yet the ships were there. For many defenders, it seemed impossible. For Mehmed, it was exactly the result he had planned. After the Ottoman ships entered the Golden Horn, everything changed. For the defenders of Constantinople, the impossible had happened. For centuries, the harbor had been one of the city's greatest advantages. Now Ottoman warships stood inside it. The Byzantines suddenly faced a threat from multiple directions. Cannons continued pounding the land walls. Ottoman ships threatened the northern defenses, and the siege tightened with each passing day. Yet despite the growing pressure, the city still refused to fall. Every breach was contested. Every attack was resisted. Every day the defenders somehow held on. Inside Constantinople, exhaustion became a way of life. Food grew scarcer. Sleep became rare. The constant thunder of artillery never seemed to stop. Citizens lived with the knowledge that every sunrise could be their last. Still, they endured. Emperor Constantine XI refused to abandon the city. He remained among his soldiers, inspecting defenses, encouraging exhausted defenders, preparing for whatever came next. His determination inspired many. If the emperor was willing to stay, then they would stay too. Meanwhile, Mehmed faced a problem of his own. The siege had already lasted longer than he expected. His cannons had damaged the walls. His fleet had entered the harbor. Yet Constantinople remained standing. Every additional day increased the risk of outside intervention. A large Christian relief force had not yet appeared, but it still could. The longer the siege continued, the greater the danger. Mehmed knew he needed a decisive victory. Soon, throughout May, Ottoman forces launched repeated attacks. Some targeted weak sections of the walls. Others attempted surprise assaults during darkness. Each time, fierce fighting erupted. Each time, the defenders managed to hold. The losses mounted on both sides. But the pressure on Constantinople was becoming unbearable. Then fate intervened. One of the most important defenders of the city was a Genoese commander named Giovanni Giustiniani, an experienced soldier respected by both his men and the emperor. Throughout the siege, he had played a critical role in organizing the defense. Wherever the fighting was fiercest, Giustiniani could usually be found nearby. His presence gave confidence to the defenders. Then, during one of the final attacks, he was seriously wounded. Accounts differ on exactly how it happened. Some describe an arrow. Others mention cannon fragments or gunfire. What matters is the result. Giustiniani could no longer fight. He was carried away from the walls. The effect was immediate. Many defenders were stunned. Some believed the city's best military commander was leaving at the very moment he was needed most. Morale began to crack. Mehmed recognized the opportunity. He had spent weeks searching for a weakness. Now he believed he had found one. The young sultan ordered preparations for a final assault. This would not be another probing attack. This would be everything. If Constantinople survived, the siege might fail. If Constantinople broke, history would change forever. Across the Ottoman camp, soldiers prepared through the night. Weapons were sharpened. Armor was checked. Prayers were offered. Thousands knew they would soon participate in the most important attack of their lives. Inside the city, the mood was equally tense. The defenders understood what was coming. The bombardment intensified. The walls shook continuously. Everyone sensed the end was approaching. On the evening of May 28, 1453, Constantinople entered its final night. Churches filled with worshippers. Citizens gathered with family members. Soldiers took their positions along the walls. For many, there was little hope left. Only determination. Emperor Constantine XI spent the evening among his men. According to later accounts, he addressed the defenders and urged them to stand firm. He knew the odds. Everyone did. Yet no one spoke of surrender. As darkness covered the city, an uneasy silence settled over Constantinople. Then came the dawn of May 29th. The final assault had begun. Wave after wave of Ottoman troops advanced toward the walls. The first attackers rushed forward. Many fell. Others reached the defenses. Fighting erupted across the battlements. The defenders held. Then another wave arrived. And another. The pressure never stopped. For hours the battle raged. Mehmed committed more and more troops. Gradually, the defenders began to weaken. They were exhausted, outnumbered, running out of options. Then, amid the chaos, Ottoman forces discovered an opportunity near a damaged section of the defenses. A breakthrough, small at first, but enough. Once attackers gained a foothold, the situation changed rapidly. Ottoman banners began appearing inside the defenses. The impossible was becoming reality. After more than 1,000 years, Constantinople was finally breaking. As Ottoman soldiers poured into the city, Emperor Constantine XI made a decision. He would not flee. He would not surrender. The last Roman emperor would make his final stand. The battle was lost, but Emperor Constantine XI refused to accept defeat. As Ottoman soldiers poured through the breached defenses, panic spread across parts of the city. Some civilians fled toward churches. Others barricaded themselves inside homes. The streets that had witnessed centuries of history were descending into chaos. Yet the emperor remained calm. For weeks, he had stood beside his defenders. Now he would share their fate. According to later accounts, Constantine removed the imperial insignia that identified him as emperor. No crown, no royal robes, no symbols of rank. If he was going to die, he would die as a soldier, not as a ruler hiding behind titles. Around him, the remaining defenders prepared for one final stand. They knew the city could no longer be saved. The walls had been breached. The enemy was inside. There would be no miracle, no relief army, no rescue fleet. The end had arrived. Somewhere amid the fighting, Constantine reportedly addressed the men around him. Then he charged into battle. What happened next remains one of history's great mysteries. No reliable witness recorded his final moments. His body was never identified with certainty. Some accounts claim he fell while fighting Ottoman soldiers. Others suggest he disappeared into the chaos of the battle. Whatever the truth, one fact is clear. The last Roman emperor died defending his capital. With his death, a political tradition stretching back nearly 1,500 years came to an end. The Roman Empire was gone. Not weakened, not reduced, gone. Meanwhile, Ottoman troops continued advancing through the city. Resistance collapsed sector by sector. Defenders who had fought for weeks found themselves overwhelmed. By mid-morning, the outcome was beyond doubt. Constantinople had fallen. After more than 1,000 years of survival, the city that generations believed unconquerable had finally been conquered. For the Ottoman soldiers flooding through the gates, the moment was historic. Many had grown up hearing stories about the city. Now they stood inside it. The dream that had inspired rulers for centuries had become reality. And at the center of it all stood Mehmed, only 21 years old, the ruler many had dismissed as inexperienced. The young sultan who had challenged the strongest walls in the world, and won. As the fighting subsided, Mehmed entered the city. What he saw was unlike anything he had ever known. massive walls, ancient palaces, great churches, monuments built by generations long gone. This was not merely a military victory. It was the capture of one of the most famous cities on earth. According to several historical accounts, Mehmed rode through the streets toward the Hagia Sophia. For nearly 1,000 years, the massive structure had been the spiritual heart of the Byzantine world. Its enormous dome dominated the skyline. Travelers described it as one of the wonders of the age. Now it stood before the conqueror. The young sultan entered the building. The city was his. The siege was over. The dream was fulfilled. But Mehmed's ambitions extended far beyond conquest. Many rulers would have viewed Constantinople as a trophy. Mehmed viewed it as a future capital, a center of power, a city that could become the heart of a new empire. Rather than abandon it, he intended to rebuild it, restore it, transform it. The city that had served Roman emperors for centuries would now serve Ottoman sultans. And over time, it would become one of the greatest capitals in the world once again. Yet for those who survived the siege, the day remained unforgettable. Some remembered courage. Some remembered loss. Some remembered triumph. Others remembered tragedy. But everyone understood they had witnessed something extraordinary. A moment historians would discuss for centuries. The end of one age and the beginning of another. But the fall of Constantinople did not simply destroy an empire. It reshaped the future of Europe, the Middle East, and the entire world. And the consequences of Mehmed's victory are still visible today. For the people who witnessed it, the fall of Constantinople was the end of a siege. For history, it was the end of an era. On May 29, 1453, one of the most important cities in the world changed hands. But the consequences reached far beyond its walls. The Byzantine Empire was gone. What remained of the Roman Empire had finally disappeared from history. For nearly 15 centuries, Roman emperors had ruled somewhere in the Mediterranean world. Now that unbroken chain had ended. The empire of Caesar, Constantine, and Justinian existed only in memory. Yet while one empire died, another was reaching its peak. The Ottoman Empire emerged from the conquest stronger than ever. Mehmed was no longer simply a sultan. He became known as Mehmed the Conqueror, a title that would follow him for the rest of his life. And Constantinople became the center of his growing empire. The city did not remain a battlefield for long. Mehmed immediately began rebuilding it. New residents were encouraged to settle there. Markets reopened. Infrastructure was repaired. Trade returned. The city that had nearly collapsed under siege slowly came back to life. Over time, it would evolve into one of the most important capitals in the world. A bridge between continents, a meeting point of cultures, a center of politics, commerce, and learning. Today, the city is known as Istanbul. But the shockwaves of 1453 extended far beyond the Ottoman world. Across Europe, the news spread rapidly. Many rulers were stunned. For generations, Constantinople had served as a barrier between Europe and expanding powers from the east. Now that barrier was gone. The psychological impact was enormous. Some feared further Ottoman expansion. Others saw the fall as a warning that the balance of power was changing. And in many ways, they were right. The conquest marked the rise of the Ottomans as one of the dominant powers of the early modern world. For centuries afterward, Ottoman armies would influence events across southeastern Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. But another consequence was unfolding quietly. For centuries, Constantinople had been a center of knowledge. Its libraries preserved ancient Greek and Roman texts. Its scholars studied works that traced their origins back to antiquity. As the city changed hands, some scholars traveled westward into Europe. Historians continue to debate exactly how large this influence was. But many agree that the movement of knowledge from the Byzantine world contributed to intellectual developments already underway in Renaissance Europe. Ideas crossed borders. Manuscripts changed hands. Ancient learning found new audiences. History was moving into a new age. And at the center of that transformation stood a 21-year-old ruler who refused to believe that Constantinople was unconquerable. That may be the most remarkable part of the story. When Mehmed inherited the throne, many saw a young and inexperienced sultan. Some believed he would spend years consolidating power. Others expected him to struggle with internal politics. Few imagined he would accomplish what generations of rulers had failed to do. Yet he succeeded because he approached the problem differently. He studied history, he studied failure, and rather than accepting the limits that others accepted, he searched for solutions no one else had attempted. Giant cannons, meticulous planning, a fleet moved across land. Each decision pushed the siege one step closer to success. In the end, Constantinople did not fall because its walls suddenly became weak. It fell because a determined ruler found ways to overcome strengths that had protected the city for centuries. That is why the story continues to fascinate people today. It is not merely the story of a battle, or a siege, or even an empire. It is the story of persistence, a dream that survived generation after generation, a city that seemed impossible to conquer, and a young sultan who refused to believe that impossible meant impossible. More than 500 years later, the walls still stand, the harbor still exists, the skyline still dominates the Bosporus, and visitors still walk through places where history changed forever.